Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. Today we have a review of Transatlantic. This is from Rio Grande Games. I believe it came out at Essen, but it's just hit stores over here.
Yeah, so this one is from Matt Gertz, who also did the extremely popular and highly ranked Concordia.
You may have heard of it.
Which is one of my favorite games of all time. It's such a simple game to play and to introduce and to teach new players. This falls exactly into that same category. It actually shares a lot of the mechanics from Concordia as well.
Yeah, definitely the card play for sure, right?
So this is a 2 to 4 player game. Takes about an hour to an hour and a half, and we are serious when we say that. It's a very quick playing game, especially once you know how to play it.
Once you get into it and understand how it's played, not just the mechanically, but how it scores more than anything, it plays pretty quickly.
Yeah, so let's talk about all these different components. Of course, each player is going to start with a hand of cards. These cards, again, are things just like Concordia. If you're familiar with that game, you're going to be playing one of these every single turn and enacting that ability, stacking it in front of you, but not being able to use it again until you refresh all those cards in a future turn. Also, each player is going to have a player board in front of them. This is kind of their warehouse, and they're going to be filling up these particular line items with tokens to be able to get bonus points when they ship certain types or certain colored goods on ships that match those particular colors.
Yeah, exactly. These markers are going to, just for you, fluctuate the value of different types of ships that you're going to have by the end of the game.
You have a shipping lane, or these are called regions. Each of these regions is going to depend upon the number of players. We have a 3-player game set up, so you have 3 very specific regions and 1 central region called New York. These are double-sided, so you can play with different types of regions as well, depending on the number of players.
Yeah, and in New York, there's always going to be a ship called the Scotia there. This is not a player ship. It's the first ship on the board, and then players are going to fill the board with their initial ships.
You have coal. All the ships in the game, except for the initial ships, which are sail ships, will require coal to be able to transport. Transporting is how you acquire money within the game. So in order to transport, and when we talk about that term, you're going to have coal on those particular ships. Each of the ships in the game can only hold 3 coal maximum. You have some paper money that you're going to be using. You're going to need money in this game because ships get progressively more expensive as you get deeper into the game.
Yeah, the money is half of this game. This is more about money in the early parts and more about points in the latter part of the game.
You also have captains. Each of the captains will mark your particular ships on these regions, and you have trading houses. Trading houses will go in these different trading houses on each of the region boards. Those are going to give you points when you score or transport particular ships.
Right. Finally, you have across the top all the ships that are basically for purchase.
Yep.
These are going to come out of a deck that is stacked by era. So older ships are going to come out, and then they get newer and newer and newer, and this is going to play into how you put your ships in these different regions.
And they get progressively more expensive as well. Also, just talk briefly about what a ship card looks like. When you look at the ship card, it has a color around it. That's the type of ship that you'll be using. That's very important when you score points during the game and at the end of the game as well. Also along the bottom is you have your tonnage, your speed, and the number of passengers. Those reflect very particular cards that you could use in the game that could interact with those. Otherwise, they have no inherent ability initially.
Yeah, not too much. Those look like they're going to be more meaningful than they are, but they do come into play just depending on what you take from the display of cards at the top of the board.
And then you have a cost and then amount of money or revenue that you get when you transport. So the red is the initial cost of that ship, plus whatever the board may have. We'll get into that in a moment. And then how much revenue you're going to score when you actually transport that particular ship on one of your region lines. So again, to start the game, every player is going to have 7 cards in their hand. Every player has the exact same 7 cards. You're going to seed the board with the Scotia in New York, and then each player is going to start with a sail ship with a captain on those, and then they're going to be able to buy from the player tableau in reverse turn order one of the ships on the board.
Right, and you can buy any one of those ships, and this is going to be the only time you buy a ship and you don't follow the general rules for doing so. When you buy a ship, you take that, you place it in the region with the player to your left. The goal of the setup here is that each region has different players in it. You don't want one region that has 2 of your own ships. If you've done that, you've set the game up wrong.
Yeah, and again, you're going to notice when you look at the player or this main board itself, the sail ships, or the starting ones, will not have coal, and they never will have coal. And then every ship after that will have to have a coal on it when it's introduced to the game board.
Right, and the nice thing is when you introduce or deploy a ship to the game board, You're just going to put a captain on it and a coal. You don't have to have coal ready for it. It gets one for free.
In the base game. Although there is a variant, which is very
game.
cool as well. We'll talk about the end. So, on your turn, it's very simple. You look at your hand of available cards and you pick one of them and enact that ability. I'm going to talk about the Shipyard first. This one is the most simple to explain. It just allows you to purchase up to 2 ships. One of them you can deploy at sea, and the other one you have to set next to your player board. Again, when you buy one of these ships, you're looking at the red costs on the ship, plus any modifier directly below it. So newer ships that get introduced to the track are more expensive. Number one, because they are more modern era ships, but naturally two, it costs an extra $70 or $50 buying from that particular line. If you are able to afford 2 ships, and that's not normally possible, but if you are able to do it, you take the 2 ships that you want to buy, you pay their costs, and one of them you're allowed to deploy, and one of them you set off to your side. So if I were to buy the ship, it would cost me 0 plus $80. I'd give that to the bank, and then I'd be able to pick any one of the possible lines to deploy it to. When I deploy it, I simply put it face down, I put one of my captains on them, and then I get a free coal from the bank to put on that particular ship.
Yeah, and what's important, the biggest rule about deploying is you have to deploy the newest ship in any one region. So if you look at the ships in a region and the ship that you're trying to deploy is older, meaning the date is further back, it gets a little confusing at times. But if it's a newer ship, you can place it there. If it's an older ship, you need to look for another region. There is a rule, and this only comes out at the beginning of the game, that if there's space where you could shift some cards and go in between, you can do that, but only if there is space at the bottom of that region. If the regions are full with ships,
you can't push one off the end of the board.
You can't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you actually purchase that ship and deploy it, and possibly deploy another one to the left side of your player board, you're going to leave some empty spaces on the track. What happens here is the one that's furthest to the left gets thrown into a bank off to the side, and you're going to notice that all of the 5 different color ship types are going to be represented through the course of the game. Some with more, some with less. The ones that have more are going to be worth more points. We'll get into how those actually reflect. So you're going to remove it, add it to any additional cards, or start a new row, and then every single one of these is going to push down and create a new market, introducing new ships into that market itself.
Right, it really moves the ships along. Like we said at the beginning, the game moves along at a nice clip, and it's largely because you're retiring a ship every time you buy even one. So the next thing you can do, of course, once you have ships deployed, is transport. Now there's a number of different cards in the game that you might acquire that allow you to transport in different ways. But the basic transport card allows you to transport from 2 ships. You can choose any 2 of your ships on the board, and you're going to transport from them. Jeremy said earlier, any steamship has to have coal on it to do this. The sail ships don't. So what you're going to do is pick a couple of your ships. Say I would take this ship as my sail ship, this one is my steam. I remove the coal. I'm going to get $30 from this ship, $20 from this ship. Now, we haven't covered this yet, but if you have trade houses in any of those regions, you're also going to score points for any ship in that region multiplied by the number of trade houses you have there.
Yeah, so in other words, if David had 2 ships in here and he used both of these to ship from and he had 1 trade house, he would score 2 victory points. If he had 2, it's 2 times the number of ships that he shipped with. The other thing I want to mention with these transport cards is at the very top of the cards, it says deploy 1 ship if possible. It's in really small writing, but that's important because as you acquire ships, as we said, one of them will get deployed, one of them is going to go to the side of your board. When you play one of these, it also gives the option of deploying one of them that you've previously acquired in a previous round.
And that can be good and bad.
Yeah.
You know, you generally want your ships out there. But if ship next to your board is still going to score points at the end of the game, it's just not going to give you any money during the game.
Right.
But on the other hand, you might have to deploy in a situation where it may be pushing one of your ships off the board. It may be doing some things to the board you don't want it to, but you have to pay attention to that for sure.
One of the other ways to transport the second card, he mentioned just the transport card. There is a region card, which is really cool too. Again, at the top of this card, it says that you can deploy 1 ship if possible. However, you get to transport all the things in one particular region. So if all of these were mine, I could ship all of them with this particular region card. And I get to ship any other player's ship that's the oldest, which is really cool as well.
And the other cool thing about that is if you're not that player, is if you have a ship in that region, you are also shipping. the biggest benefit to Jeremy is if he ships there, he's also going to get the income from my ship as well. It doesn't take it away from me, but he also gets that income.
That's a really cool card too, because I could have two things in this region that I want to ship, but I could also be fueling David's money as well, because it would also force him to ship in there, which is good for him, but it could also be even better for me.
Yeah, you'll find as you play this game, it's all about placement and strategic placement of your ships out there in terms of how you're staggering them, what kind of coal you're leaving on them. It's definitely found throughout this entire game.
So you're going to be using your coal to transport, and eventually you're going to be needing to refill each of these ships back up to their maximum 3 limit. In order to do that, you're going to use the coal card. And to do that, you simply expend it to the stack of cards, and you're going to get an X number of coal, which is 2, plus any one of the coal houses that you may have, which is an additional 1. When you place these on your ships, they have to be evenly distributed. So if you have 3 ships out there and only one of them has 1 coal on it, the other 2 are first going to have to be have coal placed on them before you can expend the third one on another ship.
Yeah, you can't load up one ship because the other ships are not as valuable to you.
Right.
So the next card is Invest card. This is sort of where a lot of the scoring is going to take place, or at least how you're going to set up your scoring. With the Invest card, you can do one of 2 different things. The first one is that you can purchase a trade house. When you do this, you're going to take one of your trade houses and place it in a region where you have at least 1 ship. Now, you'll see at the top here, there's spaces for trade houses. You're going to want to take the lowest value one.
Yeah.
They're all equal in terms of scoring, but obviously you're going to be paying less. So I could go right here, pay 20 pounds to put my trade house right here. In addition, you're also going to be able to take one of these markers, not the blue Riband, but the red, white, or green tiles you can take and add to your board. This is going to also come into scoring. This is going to set up, if you have a lot of green ships and you load up on green tiles, those ships are going to be worth more at the end of the game. The other thing you can do with the Invest card completely is to increase your coal bunkers by paying 50 pounds to take another coal bunker, add it to your board, as well as taking 2 coal immediately and adding them to your ships.
Yep. Now, one of the most important things about Concordia, and one of the reasons a lot of people love that game, is because of the Diplomat card. The Diplomat card is the card that allows you to copy other players' cards. It's all about timing and being able to use that Diplomat card. In this game, it's called the Ship Agent. That allows you to copy the top card from someone else's stack. That's a huge ability in this game. As you start to get locked by the cards that you don't have anymore and the only ones you want, the ones that you don't have left, you're going to be looking at your cards and being like, this is not the most opportune time to play this coal because my ships are already full from a previous round. So this is kind of a get out of jail free. It allows you to look around the board and say, I really need a transport. I've already used both of my transports. Now I'm going to copy yours and be able to take that ability again, or a third time that round.
Yeah, this card, probably the single best card for really setting up a couple really good strategic turns in a row. Because the other way you could use this is if you've just loaded up with coal and you really want to make some money, someone else has transferred potentially, you could play that, transfer, and then transfer again with your transfer card if you happen to still have it.
Yep. So how do you get all these cards back in your hand? That's by using the Director. Talk about the Director. The Director is really cool.
Yeah, the Director card, first thing you're going to do, you play the Director card, immediately scoop up all your cards. Now here's the cool thing. If it was the 6th card or greater, you're going to take 1 bonus. If it was the 8th card or greater in the stack, you're going to take 2 bonuses. And those bonuses are a combination, if you're taking 2, of these marker tiles or coal tiles. They have to be different in the case of taking 2, but if you're taking 1, you just take one of those and add it to your board. Finally, and this is probably the coolest aspect of the Director, you're going to be taking one of these extension cards, which is effectively a new card for your hand. You're going to take it from this display up here and play it immediately. This is your new discard pile, if you will. So you get the benefit of that immediately, but it's there until you play the Director card again. Now these cards are largely, we haven't talked about these much, a lot of them are basically improved versions of the cards you have, but some of them are completely different.
Absolutely.
And many of them, like Jeremy said at the beginning of the game, key off of some of those specific elements of each ship. This one, for instance, is going to get me income when I transport, but according to the tonnage of the ship.
Yeah, I had one when we played that was a cruise director, which was really cool.
Yeah.
It was all dependent upon how many passengers my ship held. I had one that had like 2,200 passengers, so I was getting $220, which is fantastic.
And these cards are really cool because you're going to look up at those and see these different opportunities for scoring that are not built into the base game. So the basic game is really all about these colored flags and the different colored ships that you have. These cards are going to give you opportunities to score, like Jeremy said, passengers, tonnage.
Yeah.
There's some where you can just score for a variety of your ships and you don't even have to transfer. You're just scoring straight up victory points. So there's a lot of different routes that open up with those extension cards.
Now, let's talk about the review. And talking about the review about the game, we also want to touch on a gameplay mechanic that we kind of glossed over. Eventually, as you're going to notice, a lot of these lanes are going to fill up and things are going to push off the board. This is very important understanding this game, and it's really the linchpin of the game itself. You're wanting to fill up your ships as quickly as possible, but you're also wanting to transport the goods off them because you don't want to be in a situation where someone is introducing a new ship to a lane and you have 3 coal on the bottom one, none of them which you're getting any points for except you get a free ship when someone pushes you off, but you can only sell 1 of those coal, not all 3 of them, which this is all about managing the game. This is all about managing your ships and using your cards as efficiently as possible, which is really the best part about the game itself.
Yeah, the game, like we said at the beginning, is kind of broke into 2 different aspects. There's this income aspect where you're getting a lot of money, using that money to buy ships, but then there's not a lot of avenues of scoring points except when more and more ships get deployed and that ship gets bumped. It's not necessarily a bad thing because that's when you're going to score the most points throughout the game.
Yeah.
You might score points from your trade houses as you transport, but when a ship gets bumped off the bottom of the board, one of 2 different things can happen. First, if you can redeploy, and this is only usually going to happen at the beginning of the game, you have to redeploy. So you're going to take that ship and put it into another region, again, if you can, following the rules for placement. It has to be the newest ship. There has to be space for it. But if you can't, that ship is going to do a couple things. One, if it has coal on it, you get a free farewell transport, as they say. So you're going to score it just like you normally would if you were transporting it. Then you're going to score it according to the ships in the dock. So say, for instance, I had a red ship that just got bumped off the bottom of the board. We'd look over here, 1, 2, 3 red cards. We'd look at my board and see how many red tiles I had. That's how many points this ship would be worth. It's discarded from the game, but I get those points immediately.
Yeah, again, all those different pieces are going to mix together. That's the joy of the game, trying to figure out that puzzle, when to ship, when to transport, when to introduce new things, when to fill up your coal, when to go for particular cards, when to scoop back up all your cards. All of that is integral to understanding this game.
Yeah,
and it's the joy of the game as well.
It really is, and you'll find very quickly that this is one of those games where it has multiple paths for points, and people take those multiple paths. Every game I've played of this, some people do trade houses, some people don't do any trade houses. If you do trade houses, you got to milk those as much as you can with transports to get your points. Otherwise, you want your ships really to start bumping off the board, or to have a lot of ships out on the board at the end of the game.
Yeah. The actual art on the ships is fantastic. Shifting over to graphic design, I'm not a huge fan of the graphic design itself, but the actual art within the game is fantastic. Nor am I a big fan of paper money. I would replace this immediately with metal coins or something.
It's nice looking. It really is. The ships, like Jeremy said, are fantastic. In fact, there's also this really cool booklet that they have in here. If you're a history buff, we got pages and pages of each ship and a history on each with the art repeated here as well. Like you said, the graphic design, it's more about how the components are put together. There's a lot of little pieces and parts of components laying out on the table, so it's hard to make that look really attractive. And depending on the shape and size of your table, you're going to find that you'll set this game up differently every time.
Yeah. There are some variants within the game, too, so if you like a lot of variability, you're going to get variability on the way the ships come out. Although the deck is stacked, there's enough different cards in each of these different eras that they're going to get mixed up and come out in a different order. Plus, you have a 7th card that can be introduced instead of your director. This one will give you... Contracts,
yeah,
exactly.
This is really kind of interesting. It's a president card. It effectively works just like the director. It allows you to scoop your cards up. But a different element enters the game. When you deploy a ship, you're going to get contracts depending on the tonnage, the speed, and the passenger capacity related to the rest of the ships in that region. If you're the best in any one of those 3 categories, you get a contract. If you're the best in all 3, you'll get 3 contracts. And then when you use the director card, you're able to use those contracts.
President card.
Oh, yes. Use the
President card.
President card. You can
Yep.
use those contracts as a currency to buy some of the markers and other elements in the game.
Another very cool thing is this board here where the ships will lay is double-sided. On the other side, there is no additional value to buying the ships. They're just the flat value of the ships themselves. However, only the first 3 will provide coal on them. As we said, anytime you introduce something to the game board, it's going to come with the free coal from the bank. Not so in this case.
Yeah.
If you buy something from any of these other ones, you have no coal. So you're going to have to use your coal card much more strategically.
Yeah, well, and much more in generally. The
Yeah.
coal card doesn't really come out as much as you might think in the base game.
Yeah.
You don't really need to have 3 coal on all your ships at all times, but you definitely want to have some coal on them for sure.
Yep. You haven't played Concordia, so you
I
can't
have
really
never
talk
played
about...
Concordia, so I can come at this from a very fresh perspective.
Yeah.
As I taught this to Jeremy, and he's like, okay, like Concordia,
Yeah.
like Concordia.
Right.
So that was all fresh to me. But coming at it from a fresh perspective, I really, really like this. I do want to try Concordia now, but I really like this theme a lot. Like I wasn't sure that I was going to, but the ship art is fantastic.
It is.
I have to admit, I haven't read this history, nor probably will I, because it's
Yeah.
not my sort of thing. But I like that it's there. I like that it sort of adds to this whole theme. There's a lot of other elements to this, and this isn't really related to Concordia, but back on components, there's some really nice touches here. Like all the player hands, they have different card backs,
Yep.
which is really
Pretty
cool, in their player color, even though all the cards are the same. Little touches like that. The components are all very nice. They're probably not the best in terms of graphic design, but there's
Right.
a really quality game here for sure.
But neither was Concordia, so
No.
I can forgive it on that end. As far as differences between Concordia, it does use the same basic hand management system in it. No longer are you traversing a board. There's not really area control in Concordia, but you are going out there collecting resources, putting trade houses on the board, and building networks. You have no real network structure in this. However, it has the same basic feel of that game, which I appreciate. Plus, it plays extremely quick, just like Concordia. So it just depends basically on what you like. The one thing I miss from Concordia is having those end of the game set scoring, where you have an X number of houses on the board multiplied by the number of particular cards that you may have. That's a very cool aspect to it. So as you collect those extension cards in the other game, they're going to make stacks at the end, and then you're multiplying those by the different variations that you have.
Yeah, there is, I wouldn't say it's a variation on that, but this game does have a little bit of a feel of that with this sort of stock market aspect.
Yep.
I don't know that I'd say it's strictly stock market-like, but it
Yeah.
feels like it to me.
It does a little bit.
As you retire ships here, you're increasing the value of these of the different ships in the end of the game and when you get bumped off the board. So it really plays into why you're taking certain ships when you buy them. You mix that with looking at the extension cards. That's also going to have some impact on why you're buying which ships you want to buy. So there's a lot of really juicy decisions to make for sure.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're a fan of Matt Gertz or you're a fan of Concordia, I think there's enough familiarity between the two titles that if you like one of them, you're going to like the other regardless. So, Transatlantic from Rio Grande Games, 2 to 4 players, 60 to 90 minutes, and yes, it plays in about 60 minutes with 2
Fast
players. It's
game.
pretty fast. If you guys have any questions about it, make them in the comments below. Subscribe to us, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, everything else that we do, and we will catch you guys next time.
Bye-bye.
Season 2 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored in part by Cool Stuff Inc. Cool stuff in stock at coolstuffinc.com.